Hi, with another episode of Videos from the Ville. I'm Charlie Greenewalt, Professor Greenewalt, and this is Public Administration and Public Service Government 241. We want to turn next to organizational design in public administration. We've covered all the different organizations, and we've covered the topic of organization. Now let's take a look at organizational design. Well, what's true about organizational design is reflected through certainly organizational charts, and you've all seen organizational charts that try to depict one or another organizations, whether it be the organization of Millersville University or the organization of the state of Pennsylvania or the organization of, say, Kmart or Walmart or the organization of Hershey Chocolate. Hershey Foods. Let's take a look at organizational design. It is reflected through organizational charts, and organizational charts clearly show us two things. They show us the division of labor, and they show us who is whose supervisor, who are the superiors and who are the subordinates. But organizational charts can also show us three additional things. They can show us the nature of work performed by each and every component. They can show us the grouping of components, on a functional, on a regional, or on a service basis. And they can show us the levels of management in terms of successive layers of superiors and subordinates. How many levels of management are there? So organizational charts can also show us, in addition to the division of labor and who is whose supervisor, they also show us the nature of work performed by each component, the grouping of components, whether they be on a functional, regional, or service basis, and the levels of management in terms of successive layers of supervisors and subordinates. You find the organizational chart, however, does not show us some things. The organizational chart does not show us actually the degree of responsibility and authority exercised by positions that were on the same management level. The organizational chart doesn't clearly, in some instances, differentiate line from staff positions. Sometimes it's very problematic to figure that out. The organizational chart will show us a linear distance between the chief executive officer and other positions. That linear distance doesn't necessarily indicate the level of importance of the people in the lower levels. Give you an example. While I worked in the Senate, the administrator of the Senate would park every morning, and he would walk into the Capitol building through the basement, and every day he'd go past this office. It was an office that took care of the Xeroxing in the Senate. And in that office there was a individual who was been there for many years, and he was responsible for making sure that all the paper was ordered and the paper was distributed to all the different offices so that their Xerox machines could keep on operating. Nice man. He didn't have sort of a high skill set, but he was very loyal and worked very hard. But most importantly, he was a Yankee fan. And the administrator of the Senate was a Yankee fan. And so every day they would talk when he would come in, and they got to be very, very good friends. But through these conversations, the administrator discovered much of what went on in the bowels of the organization with different people, things that he may not have known of otherwise. So that made him a very valuable contact and a very valuable part of the team, because he helped keep the team together from top to bottom and keep it going. So the linear distance between the chief executive officer and other positions do not necessarily show their status or importance. And that's exactly what we're saying here by number 4 is organizational charts do not show us lines of informal communication. That's exactly what we're talking about here, informal communications. And it doesn't show us the informal organization. Every organization has an informal organization where some of the people who are on the chart may not have much of any say in what goes on in that place or not. When I was in Greene County, there were 3 county, as we call them, commissioners in Virginia, supervisors, 3 county supervisors. All 3 were nice men. All 3 were wonderful men. And I don't think at that point, we weren't registering people when they voted as R's or D's. They were just registered Virginians. So they were all just registered voters. But we had 3 good county supervisors. But one, the chairman, was a postman and a farmer, a lifelong resident of the county, and had a lot of common sense, a good man, hardworking man, and he had the advantage of age and wisdom, and he was the chair and did a super job. Another of the supervisors was a very successful farmer and had made quite a fortune farming, and he was on the board. The third person who was on the board was also a businessman, and he was successful, but not to the extent of the other 2. But he was a bit less focused. His interests wandered, and the first 2 would listen to the third and show him respect, but he had no say in decisions. The other 2 pretty much decided what was going to be done, and they did it probably in advance of the meeting, and the third person was just along for the ride. So he may have been at the top of the organizational chart for the county, but he literally had less clout than some of the people at the bottom of the chart. So organizational charts do not necessarily show us the informal organization. Okay? Well, organizational design, when we are faced with the prospect of putting together a new organization from top to bottom, what can we do? Well, the organizational design process will start, number 1, with a review of the organizational goals. It's the very first thing that you have to do before you design an organization. You have to determine, what do you want to accomplish? What will its job be? Second of all, the process of organizational design begins with determining what are the key activities going to be of the organization. So you review the organization's goals and you determine what the organizational key activities are. Now, all organizations have 4 types of activities, and the 4 types of activities are, number 1, top management activities. Top management activities consist of handling external relations, deciding and reflecting upon the organization's mission, making major decisions, especially during crises, and building the human organization, hiring and firing and evaluating people. So top management activities, again, consist of handling external relations, deciding and reflecting upon the organization's mission, making major decisions, and building the human organization. What are some of the other types of activities? You have top management activities, you have results producing activities. Results producing activities are normally those activities conducted by, for example, in a bus company. The major results producing activity would be what? Driving the bus, transporting people from point A to point B. So that would be a results producing activity. Results contributing activities is just another name for staff activities. So results contributing activities would be the third type of activities, and that would be advising, training, and legal research, for example. The fourth and final type of activities would be hygiene and housekeeping activities. Hygiene and housekeeping activities. So the 4 types of activities that we find in each and every organization would be top management activities, results producing activities, results contributing activities or staff activities, and hygiene and housekeeping activities. Those are the basic four. What are the relationship among these activities? Well, we find that Peter Drucker, the English administrative theorist who's written so much in this field, he tells us, number one, that results producing activities should never be subordinated to to non-results producing activities. So the first thing Peter Drucker tells us when talking about the relationship among these four activities, results producing activities should never be subordinated to non-results producing activities. Number two, support activities should never be mixed up with results producing activities. Number three, top management activities are incompatible with all other activities. The top management activities are incompatible with all other activities. Number four, advisory staffs should be few, they should be small in size, and they shouldn't be involved with operations. Advisory staffs should be few, small in size, and not involved with operations. And number five, and lastly, organization. Under organizational design, hygiene and housekeeping activities. Hygiene and housekeeping activities should be kept separate from all other work. Hygiene and housekeeping activities should be kept separate from all other work. If it's not, it'll never get done. It'll never get done. It has to be separated. Now, where do we make decisions? I hope you're following along on your PowerPoints that you have, and you can see some of our illustrations and some of the additional material here. But where should decisions be made? Decisions need to be made as close to the scene of action as possible. As close to the scene of action as possible, yet high enough in an organization to ensure that all activities, all affected activities are fully considered. For example, when we first went to Vietnam and you had a patrol on the ground, say in the Mekong Delta, and if they came under fire, they might need or request air support to try to get out of that situation. Well, you know where that decision was made. At the beginning of the war, the decision to provide air support for ground operations in South Vietnam was made a quarter of a world away. It was made in Honolulu, Hawaii, and naval headquarters, military headquarters there, I should say. That was way too far away. You wanted eventually the decision-making authority was transferred. It was transferred so that commanders who were on the scene behind the line of battle could make that decision. So that decision should be made by someone who is close to the scene of action, but yet a little bit removed so you can see the big picture. How do you make organizations effective? Well, we know that all organizations that are effective what do they need? They need the following. They need clarity. They need clarity. Effective organizations need flexibility. And effective organizations need simplicity. Clarity, flexibility, simplicity. Clarity, flexibility, simplicity. Simplicity means you don't want to have any signs of over-organization. Over-organization. Over-organization can be seen through a number of things. Over-organization, and from time to time in the past, we've seen that, for example, here even at Millersville University. Over-organization can be seen through excessive procedures. Excessive procedures, that means red tape. Too much red tape. Another sign of over-organization are too many committee meetings. Too much red tape, too many committee meetings, and unnecessary line assistance. If you have all sorts of folks that want to help you with support activities, unnecessary line assistance, that's one of the things that happens more and more in the modern world. Now, we could move to productivity. How do we know if our organization is productive or not? This is an important question. What is the definition of productivity? Actually, I want you to remember that productivity is nothing more than input divided by output. I'm sorry, said it just the other way around, excuse me. Productivity equals output divided by input. Productivity equals output divided by input. Why is productivity important? Productivity is important because declining levels of productivity will contribute to inflation. Second reason is that increases in productivity are the root for what? Increases in productivity are the root for better living standards and better environments. Thirdly and finally, the importance of productivity. With more than 1/5 of the American workforce, with more than 20% of all American workers employed in government, the growth of output is vital. The growth of output in government is vital for the nation's growth. So that needs to be borne in mind. How can we improve productivity? Well, improved productivity can be found through using the best new technology. When Milton Hershey moved from having groups of women in white uniforms around a big stainless steel top table with a huge lump of chocolate in the middle, and they each had little putty knives, and they would dig out some chocolate and mold it by hand into the shape of a kiss and then wrap it individually in tin foil. That produced lots of kisses, but once Milton Hershey decided to put in conveyor belts, and these pistons would come down and shoot a perfectly formed chocolate kiss onto a belt, and then the belt would take the kiss to the end of the line, and a machine line would pick it up, a chain link line would pick it up, and that would take the kisses to another machine which would wrap them. We went from a situation where women were making, workers were making kisses by hand, to a situation where now Hershey can produce millions of kisses each day just in Hershey. So the use of the best new technology, improving productivity, can also be done through ensuring that financial restrictions are not hampering productivity. Ensure that financial restrictions are not hampering productivity. Number 3, the intelligent use of incentives. Find that all government programs do incentivize human behavior, that we all behave differently based on one set of government rules and regulations or another. And we find that current government incentives frequently penalize bad performance, but they rarely reward good productivity levels. Rewards tend to go to employees who will use all their budget and build larger organizations. What we need to do is to reward government workers, reward those who can accomplish more with fewer resources. Those are the people we're looking to recognize and to reward. We need to reward people who can accomplish more with fewer resources. The fourth and final way of improving productivity is simply to use the private sector. We in Greene County would have a fall cleanup day. And in the fall cleanup day, we would simply ask all the private organizations to come out and help us clean the county, and we'd have a competition among them. We offered them a trophy for their headquarters if they won the prize. We would have the Lions Club come out, the Seroptimus come out, the Kiwanis Club, the Rotary Club, the Grange, and they would compete against one another on a Saturday from, say, 7 in the morning till 4 in the afternoon. They would go around the county and pick up trash and bring it back, and it would be weighed, and whoever brought in the most trash would win the trophy. They would be able to take that back to their clubhouse and say, we are the champions this year. And we made a big deal out of it, and therefore we got a couple hundred people working for the county And what did they get? They may get to hold this trophy for a year, and then the day was over, the trash was weighed, and we wouldn't tell them the results. We'd have them go home, take a shower, and then come back in the evening. And what resources did we have to expend? All we did was the high school donated their cafeteria to us, and all we had to do was buy spaghetti and some salad materials and some soda or punch, and that was about it. And maybe as well some chocolate cake or peanut butter cake, and the people would be very, very happy getting a nice plate of spaghetti, some salad, some cake, and they get to spend all day with their friends. They get to see if their club was the one that picked up the most trash or not, and whether or not their club gets to hold the trophy that year or not. We spent just a little bit of money for spaghetti, and we got hundreds of people coming out picking up trash everywhere in the county for us. Use of the private sector, no doubt about it. You also use the private sector, for example, of course, hiring companies that will work more cheaply than perhaps government resources would require, and they might work harder and longer. The use of the private sector. Well, when we're talking about organizational design, we also have to touch on the issue of reorganization. Reorganization is part of course, organizational design. What is it about reorganization? Reorganization has to be done a couple times during the life of an organization. When are those times? Let's take a look under reorganization. What are the occasions for reorganization? The occasions for reorganization are, number one, the growth of an organization. When an organization gets bigger, it has to reorganize. Number two, the growth of an organization will also find that reorganization needs to happen when there's new management techniques, there's new equipment, there's new technology, and it could modernize an agency. This would be an occasion for reorganization. A third occasion for reorganization might be the obsolescence of low-ranking organizations in light of fundamental policy changes at the highest level of government. Here would be, we're reorganizing the State Department, specifically the United States Information Agency, or the Agency for International Development. And we're going to, for example, send, under Jimmy Carter, we're going to send all of our foreign aid to the United Nations and let them give it out. So we can't take any credit for it, and we're not involved with jingoism. Well, that was what Jimmy Carter thought. Well, Ronald Reagan thought differently. So AID was very much decreased in importance and staffing under Jimmy Carter. But then under Ronald Reagan, he said, if we're giving someone aid, we want them to know it's from us. We want credit for our good deeds. And we want to show the world how we do so many better deeds, so much more better work than anyone else. So he reinvigorated the Agency for International Development. This is third area where we need to have reorganization, the obsolescence of low-ranking organizations in light of fundamental policy changes. You can see that. Fourthly and finally, to realize higher levels of efficiency. You can realize higher levels of efficiency sometimes when you reorganize. And that's what happens. When we look at reorganization, we wonder, gee, this was done to try to save money, right? It's done to have better performance. Well, Frederick Mosier took a good hard look at all major federal reorganizations between 1949 and 1969. There were 86 of them, and he did this huge book on these reorganizations. Out of 86 reorganizations that the federal government took, question into all of you is how many of these reorganizations actually saved money. Out of 86 federal government reorganizations, how many of them saved money? Well, you would be a winner if, in fact, you said three. Three, and only three of those 86 actually saved money. Well, this goes back to the fact that many times reorganization is done not for the purposes of saving money, not for efficiency, but sometimes because of politics. Reorganization is sometimes done for political reasons. No reorganization can be politically neutral. Let me repeat that. No reorganization can be politically neutral. Reorganizations can be used for a number of things. Reorganizations can be used to alter budgetary allocations from Congress. Reorganizations can be used to dump or to kick upstairs unwanted employees. Reorganizations can be to dump troublesome committees or subcommittee chairs. And reorganizations can be done to save programs with little support, to save programs with little political support. Those are all political aspects of reorganization. Now, when we take reorganization too far, then we develop something that Frederick Mosher called organizationitis. And there's a slide on organizationitis in your PowerPoints, and there's a picture, one of the few pictures you'll ever see of Frederick Mosher on the lower right-hand side. It's a good picture of him, actually. You find that organizationitis, according to, and let me spell that for you, organizationitis is O-R-G-A-N, O-R-G-A-N-I-Z-I-T-I-S. O-R-G-A-N-I-Z-I-T-S, organizationitis. He says this is when reorganization has gone too far. And one of the classic cases of this he was caught up in and involved with, and that was at the United States State Department through the 1960s and 70s. We find during this period of time there were four major reorganizations of the State Department. Well, one was the Herter Commission. We find that when President Kennedy came into office, he felt that the State Department needed to be reorganized, and he appointed the Secretary of State under President Eisenhower, the last one was Christian Herter, to take a look at the State Department and its operations and what needed to be changed. So there was the Herter Commission, and the Herter Commission was handled, its work was handled by Frederick Mosher. Frederick Mosher was the executive director of that commission. So that was the first set of recommendations on how to reorganize and revitalize the State Department. Well, after the Herter Commission, under the Johnson administration, we had the creation of a set of recommendations called Toward a Modern Diplomacy. This was done by the Foreign Service Agency, by the Foreign Service officers themselves. We find that the American Foreign Service Association, their professional association, is just on the other side of Virginia Avenue in Washington from the State Department. And you find that they FSOs would meet frequently, and they decided that they needed to have their own independent study of the State Department. So they did. And out of that came this book, Toward a Modern Diplomacy, where they recognized that the State Department had serious flaws, and they wanted the State Department to do something about it. Of course, the next president after President Johnson is President Nixon, and his baby is foreign affairs, and this is what he lives for. And he comes into office, and he gives the State Department their own power to conduct their own investigation. And they do, and this is called a study called Diplomacy for the 70s. Diplomacy for the 70s. They put together their own set of recommendations on things that needed to be done and changed at the State Department. In his second term, he appoints Ambassador Murphy, an U.S. ambassador to Turkey, to head up another commission that was going to investigate how the State Department worked and what they needed to do to change to improve. And out of that came the Murphy Commission report. And the Murphy Commission report was implemented as well. So Mosher tells us that you had 4 reorganizations of the State Department within 13 years. And when I talked to Foreign Service officers there, when I was doing my master's and PhD work on these topics, they said, yes, all the studies were good. We all learned something from them, but we didn't have time to look at the positive aspects of any of them because they were all so short-lived. As soon as we put in all the recommendations of modern diplomacy, all of a sudden everything's changed now with diplomacy for the 70s. When we put all those recommendations in, then everything's changed from the Murphy Commission. So this is a great example of organization-itis, when we have so many reorganizations that they're getting in each other's way. So be careful of this. So this concludes organizational design and reorganization. If you have any questions, call me, talk to me, and I'll be happy to try to answer them with you. Okay? From here, we're going on to organization theory.